Long Take Review, a film podcast with one eye always on the Oscar race. I'm your host, Jen Bankard, and I'm here with two voices from the outer world. First, he's going to lead them to paradise. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
The Mahdi is too humble to say he is the Mahdi. Even more reason to know he is, as it is written. I'm doing well, Jen. How are you?
That was one of the funniest parts of this movie. I love that you chose that. I'm doing well. And he's not like the other strangers. He's sincere. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
There is no one in this room who can stand against me. Your mother's warned you about my coming. Fear the moment, but you think you could have a chance, but you are afraid. What if I could be the one? This could be the moment you've been praying for all your life. I'm good, Jen. How are you?
It's Greg Unleashed. Oh, no. That was great. I'm doing well. This happened to me last time too, where I'm just like so stymied by the quotes that I just don't know how to go on.
Yeah, it's fair.
So those were references to the film we are here today to review, Dune Part 2, the hotly anticipated, long-awaited sequel to Dune Part 1 by Denis Villeneuve. If you are like, oh wait, have you ever talked about Dune Part 1? Well, guess what? We just did. Our last episode is all about Dune Part 1. But today is our instant reactions to Dune Part 2. It is in theaters now. We all just saw it. We will probably do another episode later on where we have time to digest and kind of reflect on where the franchise is at this point. But today is all instant reaction. So if you are listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film. And then with a very clear alert, we're going to shift to spoiler mode for the rest of the show. But PT, if listeners think, and I didn't think of a Dune reference for this. Wait,
I typed one in. Say what's in the doc.
Oh, sorry.
Say what's in the doc.
Okay. PT, if listeners think we're unborn children worth listening to after listening to this episode, why did you make me read that, Greg? What can they do? What can they do? What can I do? I don't know.
I mean, I was just gonna go with if you think we're the chosen one and you don't want to miss an episode, but the unborn children, sure, timely. If you don't want to miss new episodes when they drop, please follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack, thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Really, wherever you're listening now, just subscribe. And put us in your feed. And you can also follow us for updates on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review. Oh, and you can also check out our letterbox page, LTR Pod. We now have a show letterbox, which links out to, if you look at the followers or look at who that account is following, it's the four of us. Right now, you could also look at the followers because it's only the four of us following each other. But, you should join it because we just set it up. So follow the show, LTR Pod on Letterboxd.
Amazing. And it has direct links, I saw, to all of our episodes. Very handy. We are just about ready to get into our discussion of Dune Part 2. We are actually going to forego movie news this week because Dune Part 2 coming out is the news, and we want to focus only on that. So we'll start with our short takes. I have a feeling I know the answer, but what's everybody's reaction to Dune Part 2? What do we think?
I thought it was incredible. I think that if you enjoyed the first movie, my guess is you're really going to enjoy this second movie. If you didn't enjoy the first movie, what is happening? Like, what's going on? This is epic. This is epic, huge sci-fi spectacle filmmaking, but with a strong sense of story and character underneath. And like we were saying in the retrospective episode, if you haven't listened to that, it's just that there's something incredible happening on screen every couple of minutes. And I thought it was incredible. I cannot wait to see it again.
I mean, I completely agree with PT. I actually, as I was in the theater watching it the first time, I kept thinking of PT on that retrospective episode, saying every few minutes I said, I've never seen something like that before. And then they do it again and again and again. And, it's worth thinking about, like, this is participating in if you put this in the mix of all sci-fi films, like, how do you make new troopers? How do you make new starships? How do you make new everything? And this just does it, like, incredibly well and incredibly originally. You know, at risk of being superlatively hyperbolic, these events come around maybe once every 20 years. I would say Lord of the Rings was the last time there was one of these, and it's incredible. This is why movies were invented, to go sit in a dark room and see this on a big screen. So, with all due respect to people who can't make the choice to go to the theater, everybody who can get to the theater should go to the theater, because we're definitely only getting one of these this year, that's for sure. And I think it's going to be a long time before we get more like this. So do it. Go. Jen, you said you hated it in every way and didn't recommend it for anybody. So go ahead and explain those views.
Weird take.
That would make no sense after our last episode. So yeah, I guess the scuttlebutt sort of going into this was, it's everything you loved about the first one and more. And I would say that's mostly accurate. I feel like, on our retrospective episode, we talked about sort of like a hefty handful, but a handful of moments where it was like, I cannot believe they did this. I've never, like, as Greg just said, I've never seen this before. And I feel like this entire movie was just that. And it was just so much more expanded and so much richer. And actually, to kind of maybe add something new to build off what both of you just said, I think the thing that all that stuff that we just talked about, I was expecting. But the thing I wasn't expecting was how sort of deep the politics and how much they managed to get into this movie. Because on the one hand, you could sort of say it's so much more action heavy than the first one, because it's like, really, they're going to war. There's like lots of battles and stuff like that, even more so than the first one. But I feel like the thing that I was really pleased with was that in the midst of all that, we still get the sort of like people talking in rooms, and you really understand the sort of political stakes and what's in the sort of social unrest, social forces that are sort of at play. And so that was the thing I left the theater being like, they nailed it. So I guess recommendation algorithm. Okay, I'll play the thing. So does anybody actually need a recommendation to go see this movie? Like, should we bother with this?
The first response I saw on Facebook was somebody saying, this is incredible. You all have to go. It's absolutely the best movie, blah, blah, blah. And the first comment on it was, can I go if I haven't seen the first one? And no, don't go if you haven't seen the first one. That's literally all. The only people I would exclude. Watch the first one. As long as you find it mildly interesting, then go see the second one.
Luckily, the first one is on, I think, 3 different streaming services right now. It's on Netflix, Hulu, and Max. So they're really trying to get it available to as many people as possible. / that Warner Brothers licensing contract is in a transitional phase. But yeah, I think the only, besides people who didn't see the first one, or people that are like, I have friends who are like, I don't like anything in space. Like, I don't like anything that isn't real. If it's something that couldn't actually happen, then I don't care. Like, they want a real life grounded drama. If it's about wizards or it's about spaceships, they don't care. This is going to be a problem for you. Even though, as Jen says, there's, very sort of, clear political allegories and sort of politics within the world. And I think the character work, as I mentioned earlier, is really strong. If you don't want to see cool sci-fi stuff, then that's going to be a problem for you. But I really think the fact that we're just trying to sliver off the few exclusions, it's like anyone who likes movies should go and see this, unless there's something about it that you're just like, I can't stand Timothée Chalamet's face. Then it's like, well, then you're not going to have a good time, because he's on screen a lot for 2 hours and 40 minutes.
To be fair, his face is covered for a lot of that.
True. I guess if you can't stand his face, you might be okay. I can't stand his eyes. Big trouble.
There you go. We strive for accuracy here on the Long Take Review. Yeah, and I'd say that like anyone who was even remotely a fan of the first movie, you gotta go see this and make sure you go see it in the theater. I actually have had some friends texting me asking me where the best place to go see. Like the assumption is I'm gonna go see it in the theater, but what type of theater or like what's the best setting in which for me to see it? And so that's been really fun to answer. I like had 2 people ask me that recently, and so I went to go see it in the 70mm IMAX because I have the privilege of living 10 minutes from one of the I think is it 12? I can never get the number right of how many.
It's somewhere in the low teens. It's somewhere in the low teens in the country.
Yeah, it's like I thought when for Oppenheimer I thought it was like 16. I heard 12, but yeah, so it's somewhere around there. It's only select theaters in the country that have it, and so that for me was extra incredible. I mean, like I am so lucky that I get to go there for most things that have. But the 70mm was great. I didn't have any trailers.
Interesting.
Which is the same for Oppenheimer because I think they don't want to
it's too big.
risk switching from digital to film. But we still started after like 15 or 20 minutes after the start time. So like they allowed for the buffer of the previews, but there was just nothing on the screen.
That means you didn't see anything from Ghostbusters Frozen Empire or Godzilla X Kong?
Yeah.
I don't know how you could be prepared.
All the things out of context that you were texting about the other day. I have no idea still what those are about. But yeah, so it sounded and looked incredible. And especially all of the sort of like exteriors, anytime there are like ships and people coming out of ships and things blowing up, I was just like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I think the answer to the question of what to go, any theater you can get to, if you don't have a lot of options, any big screen, go and see it. But whatever you have that is the most immersive for you, whether that's a theater that you have a big IMAX theater, obviously, I think 70mm IMAX is the standard, the gold standard, if you can get there. But if it's a Dolby theater, because the sound is amazing, if it's one that sort of like minimizes distractions for you, because they have rules about like no talking or no phones that they heavily enforce. Whatever it is, whatever you can just sink into this movie, that's where you should go.
Agreed.
Going to underscore that by saying, just as I think we're making obvious, it's worth the extra money. Like, I think we can forget sometimes that you have to often throw in the extra $5 for one of these premium formats, and absolutely do that for Dune. Skip it for Ghostbusters Afterlife, because busting is not going to make you feel good. I will say, just because I like to flaunt my own privilege, I saw this in Dolby first, and then I saw it in IMAX. Of the two, if you're like me and need to choose and showtimes are all equal, I would go IMAX. The Dolby had a little Denis Villeneuve came on and was like, hey, you made the best choice in the world, buddies. Like, this is the way to see it. And he specifically noted the contrast in sound between the battle scenes and the quiet dialogue scenes is why you should see it in Dolby. And with all respect to Denis, except I called him by his first name, even though we're not friends, I actually preferred the IMAX. My IMAX theater rattled my chair and had me vibrating, and that is chef's kiss beautiful. I think I'm going to try to sneak in a third viewing. Here in New England, we have the world's best theater inside of a furniture store. So I'm going to go check it out at that theater, which I haven't been to in a while. But, look, if you can get a premium format IMAX theater and get a Fuddruckers hamburger and shop for an ottoman, it's a good day out. So I'm there.
It's an ideal situation.
And I mean, can you still also do like acrobatics, like in a contained environment, or is that closed?
Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry. It's now an indoor ropes course. So yes, close, but they did change it. It used to be like pure trapeze school. So,
what about the Richardsons? Is Richardson still there?
Richardson is still there, and you are allowed to get whatever ice cream you want and take it into the theater, because these are all conjoined businesses, so they don't mind you. So you get your Fuddruckers burger, your Richardson shake, a giant popcorn, buy 3 extra seats for the size you're about to be, and then you enjoy the film.
You have to dump the popcorn out before you vomit into the bucket from all the stuff you've been eating. And the ropes.
Wait, but Greg, Speaking of popcorn buckets, I did want to talk about this before we go into spoiler mode because it's a fun pre-theater thing to get to think about. You mentioned that tons of people were buying the absurd, weird-looking sandworm
Yeah.
AMC bucket, right?
Yes. So I went to my first screening was 9:00 Thursday night, and people every row had probably 5 or 6 people who had the popcorn bucket. Most people seem to keep it in the plastic as like this is my treasure, and it comes with a large popcorn, which you can have them put in that bucket. But people had the popcorn separately and were preserving the bucket. And I was very aware of this because the very sweet seeming couple to my right, every time somebody walked in, either the guy turned to the girl or the girl turned to the guy and went, "Oh my God, he bought the bucket. Oh my God, look, there's another bucket." And so it was like, it was pretty steady for the whole time. And it became
Wow.
clear. I have not purchased a bucket. Oh, and sorry. And the rest of that is when I went to my 11 a.m. showing on Friday, they were out of buckets. So there were no buckets left at that AMC location.
Wow.
So I
tough.
did not give in. I'm happy with my choice, but I am starting to feel like this is one of those things where like the people who are 8 or 9 right now and their parents are saying no are gonna buy these on eBay for like a couple $100 when they're 30. So it's starting to feel like that territory. So maybe it's a good investment piece if you still see them. The long take review in no way endorses speculative collecting, but maybe it is such a thing. Lots of friends I know have bought them. They are proud. Listener of the show, Hasib, posted his proudly, and great to see that they're out there. So no disrespect to people taking the plunge. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth because like seeing everyone getting them and then hearing they're selling out, I'm just like, oh, maybe I should have had you get me one. But then I'm just thinking about like, where is it going to be in my house all the time? And then that's why when I snap back to reality, being like, I don't think I could do that. My theater is Regal, and they had Kung Fu Panda 4 buckets out already. And then I saw one Dune bucket that was just like a normal bucket with the Dune logo on it.
Someone just wrote Dune on the side.
To try to make it a popcorn. And then, but the weird thing was when I was at the concession stand, one of the employees kind of zoomed by and then held up this T-shirt and was like, "Do you want?" He was, and the sales pitch was hurried and confusing because he was like, "You can get your popcorn for free if you buy this T-shirt." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "And it costs less than it normally does." I'm like, "Okay, so I'm paying for the T-shirt, but my popcorn is free somehow," which was already free because I have a bazillion Regal points and use them to get free popcorn. You get the small free popcorn and then the popcorn upgrade. It's great. And then at first and it wasn't a bad T-shirt, but I was just so confused, and actually to the point where like I didn't even know if this was an official Regal sale, like, or if this kid was just like trying to sell Dune T-shirts while working. So, and then I said no, but so I was like, I'm pretty sure I can probably buy a very similar T-shirt somewhere else and not be confused and hold up this concession line. So that's my merch report from Regal Theaters.
I don't have a merch report because I didn't see anyone with the pint glasses from the Alamo Drafthouse, but I can say that the two things I'll note from their pre-show roll for this movie was they did here's what happened on the previous Dune, but instead of just showing clips from Dune, the Villeneuve Dune Part 1, they mixed in stuff from the Lynch movie and the miniseries, the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries.
Oh, nice.
So it was like Patrick Stewart and Josh Brolin like delivering the same line back to back, but like with
amazing.
This, like, variation,
cool.
so you could see how like the story has been told in different ways. And then they were doing alternate history of stuff from Dune, where they would take scenes from the first movie, but then splice in like something else. So like the one that stood out was Lady Jessica watching Paul Atreides in the first movie, this is no spoiler, do the sandwalk. So it was like her reactions, but when it cut to the sandwalking, it was they imposed Christopher Walken from the Weapon of Choice video dancing on the sand, and it was incredible. It was really well done. So good job to everyone involved in that.
Amazing. So this is probably a record. It's only 20 minutes in, and I think we're ready for spoiler mode already. So let's do it.
And we really stretched it to get to 20 minutes.
We did try. We talked about buckets.
4 minutes on buckets and glasses. So we're trying to fill time almost.
Yeah.
I got one more just to throw in. After our Dune hype episode, I followed the advice and went and watched 1984 Dune. And I wanted to just let listeners know, because we didn't let them know there, if you don't have enough Dune in your life, that Dune and the documentary that PT mentioned are both on Max right now. So people should check those out
nice.
if you need more Dune content. But now I will get out of the way and say, let's go to spoilers.
Yeah, let's do it. So if you have not seen Dune Part 2, I probably also should say if you've not seen Dune Part 1, because I feel like we'll probably reference things from that movie as well. But at the same time, why are you still here, I guess, if that's the case? Please go watch those movies. We've already talked about how you could do that. Go do that and come back, rejoin us for the rest of the conversation. Okay, so I purposely did not read the second half of the book, knowing that I was going to see this movie. Originally, I was going to try to read it right before, and I didn't. So then I'm going to spin it as, well, now I have the fresh perspective of like someone who didn't know what was going to happen going into it. So I have ideas for what the biggest like surprises or spoilers were, but do you two have that?
Well, the thing that I felt I had to text Greg, because I usually don't want to do like side chatter when we have a group thread and we have an episode coming up. But the thing I couldn't hold back from was how confident I was in our Dune retrospective episode of like, well, this is going to be the end of the book. They're going to end this story in Dune Part 2, and they're going to let that play out because of the potential awards impact of it. And then after next year's, a year from now, when the Academy Awards cycle is over, and hopefully Dune Part 2 wins a bunch of awards, they will say, well, maybe we'll do a third movie. And instead, this movie also ends with, this is only the beginning. Or something is now starting. And it's like, oh, when Christopher Nolan kept saying, this is The Empire Strikes Back, he doesn't just mean it's a darker sequel. He means this is clearly the second part of a trilogy that's like, we need the third one for it to make sense. So to me, that was the biggest surprise, that like, it's ending on a cliffhanger again.
Mm-hmm. I believe what you're referring to is Lady Jessica at the very end says, and now the holy wars begin,
Yes.
or have begun, or something like that, right?
She says, begun, the holy wars have.
There you go.
She does drop a Bene Gesserit influence do it at one point, which is very Palpatine. I need to note.
Yeah.
That's true. That was great. Yeah. So I guess like what were you expecting instead? If it doesn't, or is it literally just that one line that does that? You know what I mean? Like,
my memory. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was going to say, I talked on the hype episode about how I didn't get fooled last time. And I think I'm a long ways out from reading the book. I think this does largely respect where the book ends. We just didn't necessarily get all the hints that house war was going to come. And this, it's like, to me, if I had to guess, it's like, let's just grab the first chapter from Dune Messiah to toss in here. And I think for all the reasons we said in the hype episode, that's a bold choice. That was surprising. And the primary reaction when the first title card came up in both the theaters I saw it in was like a, what? Like a stunned, like, what is really? And so all that I said to defend it last time, I'm a little worried they are surprising people and people are going to be grumpy about it. But not a lot bears that out. But... Yeah.
Right. Is it just too early? And then all the grumpy people haven't seen it yet. And now they're going to be like, it did it again. It's not a whole movie. It's just setting up the next one.
I have to sit through another awesome movie in a few years. I'm gonna have to do it again. Yeah, my so it's been. I read the original book around when the first movie came out, and I've had the second book for like a year. But like Jen, I have chosen to not read it until this movie came out. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But my memory of the book and then and also the David Lynch version, which I watched again 3 years ago in a post Dune Part 1 hype cycle, is it sort of ends similarly, where it's like, Paul wins over Feyd-Rautha. The Emperor has to bow down to him. He's like, I'm going to marry your daughter. The girl that he's in love with is like, excuse me. But it's sort of left as like, so he's kind of technically sort of in charge. We don't think everyone's going to go along with this, but it's kind of just left as like,
Okay.
Oh, what are the other houses going to say? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
As opposed to this one where it's like the other houses are here and they're attacking.
Right.
So we better get going.
They will have a response. Like they are
Yeah.
like, we do not accept this. Right. Okay. I get it. That makes a lot of sense. I all through this movie, which I don't think I had for the first one, I was like, oh, this is kind of like if Game of Thrones were in space, but better. I would say in a lot of respects. But yeah, the idea of there are more houses. And then it opens up so much possibility where I'm like, what are these other houses? Because we've mostly been just spending time with like 2, 3 if you count the Emperor, right? Like, so
1 if you now no, never mind.
What?
Right, they folded the 2 together.
Oh, that's true. It's true. I mean, this is spoiler.
That's another spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was
So now
okay.
we
So, I also was like not surprised, but like very happy to see Gurney. Though I could have guessed that. You know what I mean? Like that was the one where I was like, when it happened, I was like, yeah, and then, but then I was like, well, I kind of saw that coming. Like that was the thing I assumed might happen.
And if you sat through like all the credits, not that there's like a scene or anything, but if you were just enjoying yourself and you sat through the credits, or you looked at the Wikipedia page, you could see that is it Stephen McKinley Henderson? The Mentat filmed scenes for it, but they got cut from the movie. So the Mentat is also alive, but. Maybe we'll be back in another movie. Well,
okay.
He gets a special thanks at the end. Him and Tim Blake Nelson, who was playing a new character, whose scenes also didn't make it into the movie.
I love Tim Blake Nelson.
I do too.
Wait, who was he?
I don't know.
We don't know who Tim Blake Nelson is because it would have been a new character. And there's speculation based on book characters, but he didn't make it.
Because I just remembered what show we're on. Tim Blake Nelson does an incredible job as the narrator of one of the animated shorts for this year's Oscars that people should check out. It's the one I'm going to forget. It's like 99 somethings, 99 senses or 95 senses. Okay. It's good. More on our Oscar prediction podcast coming soon.
Very soon.
In the next half hour.
In 2 days.
Right.
So I will jump on the what was your biggest surprise. I have 2 that really did. Since I just hinted at it, this movie has a Vader, Luke, I am your father moment in it, which is a reference there that I either did not remember or this is a new addition that Jessica, Lady Jessica, is the daughter of the Baron. So when they receive all the ages of memories, both she and then Paul realize that they are both Atreides and Harkonnen, which is crazy and such a cool moment in the middle of that. I find it interesting that it doesn't go too far. It just becomes like another reason to kill him. And you kind of get a little Rey Skywalker like grandfather side. Sure, that's how you say that.
Let's talk about this.
Side.
Because so why? What do you think that adds to the story? Because I do think it is a pretty significant reveal, and does complicate a lot of things in terms of the dynamics and like what for these 2 characters, what they thought they were doing and why they thought they were doing it suddenly gets kind of muddied, I think. But like, what are our thoughts? Like, let's unpack this.
I mean, I think it is to sort of underscore the Bene Gesserit on a plot level, not on a thematic level. On a plot level, it's to underscore the Bene Gesserit like plan, because I think it was like, okay, we're doing like all of these pieces. We've been cultivating this, that this was going to be, we're trying to get to the chosen one. And it seems like, and I'm forgetting now if this is something that is even hinted at in the movie, or if it's just something I was reading about in a frenzy of like excitement after seeing it. But that like in the books, as you get deeper into the books, it's that the Lady Jessica is a Harkonnen married to the Atreides family. And then they were supposed to birth a daughter who would then marry into the Imperial family. And then that child was going to be, they thought was going to be the chosen one. And then it's that Lady Jessica skipped the line, basically, because when you're a Bene Gesserit, you get to choose the gender of your child. Apparently,
You can just will
in the womb, you get to
Sounds
do.
like.
Why not? And so
Duke Leto wanted a son, right? And so she
Right.
chose him over listening to
yes,
the.
and that
Bene
is in
Gesserit.
the first movie where
Mhm.
the Charlotte Rampling is like, with your pride, you chose to have a son, and now you're putting him forward as if he could be the chosen one. So that was sort of the machinations. I think, it's I was just Googling, which is why I didn't have an immediate reaction to your question, because I was multitasking. Apparently it's not in the Frank Herbert books. It came out in the later ones that his son and
Interesting.
Kevin J. Anderson are working on, that she had Harkonnen heritage. But it seems to me like they made sure to put this in the movie to help further indicate that, like, baby Paul's not a hero. Like, he spends the first movie and, like, the first half or even maybe 2/3 of this movie being like, I really shouldn't lean into this Messiah thing. I think it's going to go really badly. And then being like, all right, I'm doing it. And, like, the character that I assume I kind of felt the most like this person is the most on top of this, which is Chani, Zendaya's character, is just sort of like, no, like, this is not good. This is a bad idea. And there's a lot of reaction shots. There's a lot going on where it's like, you have all the rousing, inspiring, like, yeah, we'll lead them to paradise. You're like, ah! And then the person that you trust the most is like, no, like, this is bad. So I think it's like, oh, actually, like, you're part evil. Like, you're part the really bad guys. All the bad guys, there's a part of that in you as well, is there to reinforce this is not just a standard white savior story. This is a critique and commentary on it, laying the groundwork for the anti-hero component of his story going into the third movie.
I like that, but I have a counter argument.
Please.
So to me, the thing I thought of when they revealed this was that so much of the story up until this point has been about, and this is sort of why Gurney, I think, comes back into the story, right? Because he's the reminder of, no, like, you are an Atreides, and, don't you remember all the terrible things that the Harkonnens did to us and to your father? And, like, don't you want vengeance, right? And I think, there's so much of, like, us versus them, and, like, Harkonnens have done all these terrible things. Don't we want to, get back at them? And I think by revealing that he is in fact part Harkonnen also sort of shows how not arbitrary, but, like, how constructed that narrative is, and the idea of, like, we are all different houses of pure bloodlines and stuff like that. And so to me, it was like, it's only because he is, like, a mixture of all these different houses. And now I would include the Fremen in that too. It's not by blood, but, like, that he is part Fremen. Like, that's why he has, like, 1,000 names. Like, if he's part Fremen and he's from the House Atreides, he also by blood is part Harkonnen. Then he is the one who is able to sort of, like, transcend or break out of the system that exists of the houses, and sort of, like, disrupt it, revolutionize it, whatever you want to call it, right? That was sort of my read on it, because it's like and again, to go back to Game of Thrones in space, it's like the break the wheel thing, right? That's from Game of Thrones, which didn't actually pan out, but that's another episode, potentially. It's a conversation for another day.
The wheel got broken in certain ways. Yes. I would like to real quickly, because now I actually read more. The webpage I opened in my multitasking, I like to issue a correction. It is in the Frank Herbert books that Baron Harkonnen is her father. It's who her mother is. That is only in the later prelude books.
First of all, clearly never listened to a fantastic Wheel of Time podcast called Through the Glass Columns, because Breaking the Wheel was stolen by George R.R. Martin from the Wheel of Time mythology. Hence, Wheel of Time. So I do just have to point that out.
That's fair.
And then in my deep research before this show on the question, and not my Googling while you were both talking, I want to just add a couple more things to this conversation, which I think kind of merge your two perspectives. So USA Today has some quotes from Denis Villeneuve, who says, talking specifically about when Paul kills his grandfather, when he kills the Baron. And his kind of read on that, which we could talk in Rhetorical Situation about how art isn't necessarily in only the eyes of the creator. He says, by doing this, Paul steps away from the Atreides way and becomes a Harkonnen, says Villeneuve. It's one of the most powerful moments of the film. All the sophistication and vulnerability of Paul Atreides is gone. We see him in his eyes. We see in his eyes the madness of war. And so I like that reading, because the brutality of then the Baron's body getting eaten by insects is, I think that's right to think of that as much more Harkonnen than it is Atreides. And that shows that he has kind of, as you were both saying, he's changed so much. I agree with Jen's thought, because so much of the book to me was him stuck between the Fremen and the Atreides world. And so now it's like they're adding a third dimension to that calculation. But it really suits when the Emperor says to him, your father was a weak man who'd lead to the I can't do walking, who'd lead to the rules of the heart, but the heart is not meant to rule. And I think that's what he says, I believe, after the Baron is killed, but before the duel. And so that to me is, again, I think Villeneuve sees the end of this film as Paul Atreides is gone, and
he's going to the dark side.
Yeah, and it was Paul Atreides who was in love with Zendaya. I do know she has a different name
Johnny.
every time. Johnny. And so that's why that relationship, spoiler alert, because I think that's going to surprise a lot of people, that is seemingly over now, and he's going into the cinematic Puniverse, as we've called it before, to marry Florence Pugh.
Right. And like she specifically says in the middle of the movie, I will always be with you as long as you stay who you are. Right. And so this is the fact that she's leaving is evidence that he's not who he is anymore. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
And then his version of it is as long as I breathe. Like I will love you as long as I breathe, which is different than being who you are.
Word choice, everyone. Important.
Also, remember, he stopped breathing. He died, right? So he loved her until he died.
Wait. No. Because didn't they say that doesn't Lady Jessica say that his life signs are so low that he's still technically alive, but he's just not, you can't detect that he's alive?
Sure. I mean, but was he breathing? Like if his life signs were so low, was there a stretch of time? I think it's possible you can read that as a symbolic.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think he said that again after in the big council scene as well. So I don't think it quite works.
Right. It's right before it's basically him being like, look, you don't know this, but I'm about to go propose to another lady over there. So just so you know, I love you. I'm going to love you until as long as I'm breathing. So whatever you see next, whatever happens next, don't interpret it as I don't love you. Right.
Yeah.
That's his way. I mean, it's like a really emotionally unintelligent way of communicating that, but because then she's like, what is happening, right? Like, and I love the editing in that scene because it does such a good job of cutting between those three characters. It's like
and the shot where everybody kneels to him, but those two are standing, it's really really, that's cinema, baby. I just also wanted to throw in the quote you used to introduce me, right? She says, he's sincere. He's not like the other off-worlders. This is clear. Oh, he's just an off-worlder. He's not actually one of us, one of the Fremen. So I think
and
all
he puts
of that,
the ring back on. Yeah.
Yeah. It all is just layered together to say like, hey, this movie has a point and a message, and it builds to it really clearly kind of across the whole considerable length.
I want to add, we talked about our theater experiences earlier. I had who seemed to be a very nice woman a few seats away who was very like vocal in her surprise reactions when things were surprised. Like if someone got shot or stabbed, like even if it was like a grunt soldier was like, oh, and so when
so every throat slit by a Harkonnen.
Yes. Like she had a big reaction. And when he was like, I'll love you as long as I breathe to Zendaya, that was like Florence, let's do this. She was like, like she had a really big gasp. Like she
amazing.
really felt that betrayal. So yeah, it played
See,
really
like
well.
I knew that, I had that on my radar. And again, like, because I didn't read the second half of the book, so I didn't know this was a possibility. But in the movie, I feel like it's there are tells pretty early on, like when the Reverend Mother, there's like when she, like in the conversations with Princess Aurelian very early in the movie, I'm like, oh, she's gonna have to be the like diplomatic marriage offering.
Right.
Like it's pretty early that I had that thought cross my mind.
Yeah, there's the Reverend Mother of the Empire does say something about like, you know, your dad's gonna have to step down. Christopher Walken's not gonna make it through this, but your family will still be there. And it doesn't explicitly be like, because you're gonna marry whoever wins the inevitable duel between Austin Butler and Timothée Chalamet. But that seemed to be pretty clear, as well as like, why is Florence Pugh in this movie to just like narrate into a diary every like 30 minutes unless she's going to be set up to have a bigger role down the way. I want to jump back briefly to the scene that Greg pulled, or Greg was talking about from that pull from the USA Today article, to talk about another big change that I think is crucial to look at in terms of understanding this movie, which is the time period is condensed in this movie compared to the book. Because in the book, Paul's sister is born, and like that is a character, is a child, but is a child who speaks in an adult woman's voice and freaks everybody out. So that whole the reference in the beginning of like hearing the unborn child is I think, yeah, that's there, but it's only there briefly. This sort of Paul is training with the Fremen, he's building his skills, his eyes are getting bluer. That's like 2 years, whereas in the movie is like, feels like it's a couple of months maybe. And so at the end of the book and at the end of the David Lynch movie and any other ones, it's the young sister who kills the Baron. And like her title is like knife wielder or something, which is that's not accurate, but it's something like that. Because she stabbed and is the one who is like grandfather, and then boom,
Interesting,
kills him. So
do you think they just thought that would be a little too weird?
Maybe.
Considering everything else we get in this movie, maybe not.
Well, maybe. I mean, I think that, given that quote that Greg said, I had thought it was like, yeah, that's weird. Like, I guess to put spoilers within the spoiler zone, if you're here and you really haven't seen the movie, like skip ahead 30 seconds. But we do get like one shot and one voiceover that his sister is going to be Anya Taylor-Joy, which was unannounced until the premiere of the movie. That they didn't want to just have a character with that voice and a little kid, and then a little kid who kills the big creepy big guy. But then Greg reading that quote earlier made me realize of, oh no, they made it a character beat for Paul. That like, instead of, having it be this extra character being like gaining in prominence, it's like, let's just keep it focused. Let's keep it about Paul, and Paul's the one who is sliding into this other persona, falling to the dark side in the parlance of another franchise.
Is the sister potentially the Kwisatz Haderach instead of Paul, or well, he's dead now, but you know what I mean? Like, were there seeds of that in the movie? I was sort of like, because there's a moment where Lady Jessica says, and the Kwisatz Haderach will be born in the South. And I'm like, well, she could be talking metaphorically about Paul and his change, but she could also be talking about this unborn child, and that she's really all of these are steps to secure the unborn child is sort of like going to emerge as the most powerful. Or am I just, is that crazy?
I think left intentionally ambiguous.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
My silence
to
is. Yeah, my silence is I don't know for sure, and if I did, I would be quiet. But and again, this is only I have never read the second book, but I have always understood the title Dune Messiah to be let's challenge the idea and problematize the idea of a Messiah. No, let's not lean in and celebrate a Messiah. So I think all of that feels like if I'm Denis Villeneuve and I've laid the track, that's what I would try to tackle for this third film that we're getting. It's weird to talk about Dune Part 3. I also, I'll just put that out here now. I have heard Denis Villeneuve has said clearly he's doing something else and then Dune Part 3. So it's not like this is immediately coming down the pike. And a huge respect. I can't imagine these are easy movies to make for the shoot, for the post-production. Everything that we've praised about them means they take a long time. So I want him to take all the time he needs, but this isn't the surprise in Spider-Verse was like, see you next year. Now that's also become false, but I don't think we're going to see Dune Part 3 for probably 3 or 4 years again.
But I will note, like, something that the friend of the show, non-listener, but colleague of Jedi, Dave Topkins, who saw it in the same screening with me. We were talking afterwards about how, like, it feels like Lord of the Rings in that it feels like these were shot back to back, even though they weren't, because there was a space and there was a pandemic that separated the productions. So I trust that even if he goes off, and I believe he's doing a different weird sci-fi story that he's adapting. Like, he's not going to be like, I'm going to do a small, earthly drama. It's like, no,
he's not like taking a break.
Right. I'm still going to have like spaceships and stuff, but it's a different world. I trust that they'll be able to come back, and if assuming they can reassemble the team, that they'll be able to make it look like a clear continuation. But it's going to be hard to wait because I want it right now.
Do we feel like, because I want to pick up on what Greg said about problematizing and kind of complicating the idea of the Messiah, did you appreciate how they handled that in this film? Or like, how, I guess maybe the better question is like, how did they handle that in this film? Did it do it enough for people, do you think?
I put the kind of this question down in the document down there, so that's why
I just didn't see.
Let's move
No,
to
you're
it.
fine. You're
All
fine.
Right. We are naturally moving to the Rhetorical Situation, a segment in which we look at a film through the lens of our academic experience. So all four of our regular co-hosts, in case you're wondering what the segment is, are writing professors. So we like to have this section of the episode dedicated to making connections to our experience as scholars and teachers. And it seems like we were naturally bumping up against something that was in here.
So I'll start with some context, and then I'll let you two do the smart part. So,
okay.
The rhetorical situation, the way I always explain it first and foremost to my students is that you can't evaluate a piece of writing or text in any way without considering it in its full context. And so Dune, the series, has a lot of the kind of familiar parts of context we've talked about before. It's an adaptation. It's part of film discourse. It's part of Oscar discourse. But I would say, as one sci-fi fan, the thing you hear about it the most is that it participates in what's commonly called the white savior formula, which has come in our modern world to be seen as quite problematic. And fans of movies or stories will kind of understand the white savior narrative is that it's usually some kind of indigenous or community that's troubled, and then a savior from the outside who, whoops, just happens to be a white man. I'm looking at you, Avatar, comes in and is the one who is actually going to take these unruly savages, using the problematic understanding of it, to put this back in order and save everybody. So particularly with Dune, and I'm just going to speak historically and then let you two talk about it in the context of this film, Dune has the Fremen, who are coded as seemingly Bedouin or Middle Eastern in a lot of ways, and then you have these imperial powers literally an empire, but also houses that are coded as European in a lot of ways. And so Dune coming out as a novel in the 60s, it felt like almost this retrograde way in which, oh, don't worry, the European powers can come back and put into order all the problematic parts of the world. And I think that is why people who kind of dislike the mythology of Dune kind of say, hold on a minute and think about that. So back to Jen's really important question, Denis Villeneuve is working on all this with that context, right? And so I think if he had presented a straight white savior narrative, uncomplicated, he wouldn't have gotten canceled, but people would have said, hold up, and thought about him a little bit more. But here, I would say his solution to the problem is that he's going to present it in a questionable fashion and not let every character be the Javier Bardem full zealot, I believe everything, but we have real splits in the kind of reaction to that. So I think it's a really good question, Jen, and why I wanted to throw it into Rhetorical Situation is because this is everything. This is what we do when we study literature. This is what we do when we study writing, is putting this in its context. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on how you think this does or does not correct for that potentially problematic part of the mythology.
Well, I will push back slightly, only in that I think that the pushing back is in the books as well. I don't know how successful it is, but I think that, again, as speaking with limited understanding, having only read the first book, but even in the first book, it is like pretty clear that like it is not going to be a good thing that he is doing this. And my understanding of what unfolds over certainly the Frank Herbert initial trilogy and then into the following 3 books that he wrote, that it's like, yep, like this was a problem. I don't know if he thought of it as, oh, I'm critiquing, sort of colonial European adventures in other lands, specifically the Middle East. But it was pushing back at the idea of someone being the savior and someone coming in and doing this, as opposed to people together working within nature and working with the planet. I also, my understanding is also that he was really into just like, we all need to take mushrooms. And so it's like, what we should be doing is taking mushrooms and feeling the interconnectedness of the whole planet, and believe in that. So someone standing up and being like, I'm the one and I should lead is that's not very psilocybic, is that the word? Is very against that kind of that mindset. So I do think that's there. I think in terms of the movie, I was glad the degree to which it was there, because I didn't think that it was, I trusted Villeneuve to not shy away from it, but I wondered if it was going to get a little buried, especially when I didn't realize that it, like, he is making this like it's a trilogy, not I'm doing Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2, and then if I can, I will do Dune Messiah as the 3rd movie based on the second book. It's like, nope, these are all of a piece. So I liked that it wasn't just those sort of hints like in the first movie of I have visions, and the visions are of all these people dying. Like, we get that the actual like shot of the vision of like the person bent over in the desert, like with their like screaming in pain, and like that comes up multiple times of like, that is what Paul sees when he sees what's going to happen when he does what he eventually does. And again, we have Chani being like, yeah, you like, I'm really skeptical of this, and I'm skeptical of you going down this path. And the movie ends on her being like, I'm not following, I'm not doing this. So I think I am sure there are going to be people who watch the movie and don't see the critique there, but like this feels like I'm gonna make a weak in terms of like cinematic reference, weak-ish, and then try to save it with a strong one. The end really reminded me of Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2, of like, we feel great, like the hero's going off to do its thing, but we're ending on the woman in his life looking like this is
like,
like, this is a mistake. Like we should not do this. And then and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is an incredible movie. I don't mean to denigrate that as a reference point. But I'll go on the flip side to the higher minded one is how much this movie pulls from Lawrence of Arabia, which came out 3 years before the book. Was I would be surprised if it wasn't part of like the, you know, whether directly or intentionally or not, you know, something that was in Frank Herbert's understanding of like, yeah, like, isn't it great when like this white person goes and like becomes, you know, does this thing, becomes a part of goes native and joins this community and rises up. And like Lawrence of Arabia, you know, is not without flaws in terms of its depictions and casting of people from different parts of the world, but is certainly not a story about like, it's awesome when Europeans go and fix things in other parts of the world. It is, you know, it's not Avatar, and it's not, you know, Dances with Wolves.
Yes. So yeah, I generally agree that I think it's in there, at least in terms of the film, right? It's in there. My worry also was that it might be too subtle. But I think the Chani character, that feels like, so you can correct me if I'm wrong about the book, but it feels like they are purposely giving her more of a spotlight than maybe she would have had in the book, for this reason, and I mean also to kind of boost, like, obviously, you know, she's in Zendaya, you want to give her as much screen time as you can. And in fact, that was like the biggest critique of the first movie, is that like it tricked people into thinking she was going to be in it, and then she wasn't. You know, so I think everything pivots on on the Chani character, right? Because she is the one, and not just her, but her faction of Fremen, right? Because that whole group of Fremen are like anti-prophecy, right? They're like, that's a bunch of hooey, right? We're not religious, we're not zealots, right? We're not fundamentalists, and not like those people in the South. We're the ones from the North who are sort of more grounded, right? And she has a very important line that is like, I think it's when they go to the South and she's in that crowd and she's not supposed to speak because she's a woman, and everyone keeps trying to get her to shut up, and she says this, she stands up and screams like, this is how prophecies are how they enslave us, right? Like this is a means of control. And I feel like if she doesn't have that line, then a lot of this kind of like is much more harder to kind of pin down. So I'm glad that they had that in there. And then also, yeah, her so very clearly and not being conflicted at all. That's actually the part I really loved, because I feel like in another person's movie or another person's adaptation of this, there's more of a, but I love you. Oh, but I cannot. Or I can, you know what I mean? There's more kind of hemming and hawing romantically about like, but she's just like, I'm out. Like, this is ridiculous. Which I really liked. But yeah, I think that her position, and you get the sense that because they have their little like war table map, and she's one of the like 3 or 4 big factions, right? And so like I definitely buy that in the next movie she's probably a big player and a leader and stuff like that. And so I think because of that, and they also kind of make a lot of comments about what is illusion of prophecy versus prophecy itself, in particular the drinking of the water of life or the poison. When Lady Jessica does it, right, Paul himself is like, no, don't be fooled. Like she's trained to do that. She has trained her body to reject poison. Like that's a Bene Gesserit thing. That's not this is fated to be thing. It's not a fulfilling of the prophecy. And then when he does it, it's the same thing where it's like, you know, it's very clearly, but then here's where it gets iffy, because then the whole desert spring tears thing is like, well, that seems real. And it seems like Chani very begrudgingly participates in the fulfillment of that prophecy, right? So it's like, yeah, I think it's really interesting that it's like hard to tell what part of what the film thinks is real prophecy versus not.
Yeah, I'll just note I liked all of that, and I think you're right that there is, you know, there is some gray area where it's like there isn't a character where you're like, well, that person is definitely right. I do think, like, I watched it and felt like Chani is the most right, but there could be someone that was like, no, Javier Bardem, Stilgar, like the true believer. He's the one who has confidence in that. I just want to note, I believe that's the second time that scene in the council is the second time that Chani is like, stories.
Oh, you're right.
The prophets are just are how they control us, because I think she's saying that when Lady Jessica's doing the ritual to become the Reverend Mother right before Paul is like, this is poison, because she's like, nah, we don't believe in the prophecy, like that's a Southern thing, this is that's just what they say to control us. But we also know, as text in these movies, it's true, the Bene Gesserit have been sprinkling those stories for generations to control them, and to sort of be like, yeah, we do that. So, we've got all these.
So if we need to, we can call upon people. Yeah,
exactly. And so we do all that to get it going. So, in that sense, she is right. But then, it's weird that like something happens. Like it does get to, there is the Desert Spring component, and we don't know enough to know if it's like, we haven't heard that prophecy before. So it's a little, the one critique that I think I could have about the movie is that the back half of this does feel like, I won't go as far as say rushed, but like, it's a lot happening kind of back to back. And there's a couple times where it's like, was there supposed to be like something before this? Like, is there a 3.5 hour version of this movie that has a couple more beats leading up to some of those things in the end, to more smoothly set it up? But that was just way too long. So yeah, that's again a very light critique. It's still a 5-star movie for me.
Is there a 3.5 hour cut of this movie that could fill in those beats and give us Tim Blake Nelson? That's my real question.
Yeah, I think
so. No.
He's the one show to say this Desert Spring prophecy. Am I right? And then he laughs. We can't have it.
So I want to pick up on a couple things in the mix of that conversation, because I think you guys handled the question exactly right. And I think one takeaway I'll take from both of your comments is, I think we have to see the part 3, because it feels like a lot of these efforts are just setting these up as themes for perhaps the ultimate big giant conflict. Johnny's original quote that PT was referencing, I believe, is even more specific to, if the means of control is that you keep people waiting so they don't rise up themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that really interesting. And I'll go further than PT. I was like starting to design my Johnny was right bumper sticker, because nice. I think we do know that the Bene Gesserit have been controlling and manipulating everything along the way. And then when Jen was speaking, one of the things I wanted to pick up on is, I think you're really right to kind of take those two groupings. And that to me, and this is not Oscar watch yet, but that to me is where you start to make a strong case for Best Picture, because it's not just let's have a fight about this. Let's code those two groups as Northern, Southern, female, male, young, old, and it's all woven into that this starts to become more allegorical for our current historical moment. And to me, that I think we're going to have some time talk about what makes sci-fi versus prestige sci-fi, but that to me is always the thing, is if your mythology can really speak to the current moment. And I do think all of these are now becoming the big questions in our society, as we see the older, more religious, coded however you want, beliefs in a system generations past, to a kind of Gen X millennial ethos of let's burn the system down and take care of ourselves. And there are a lot of systems that you could fill in there. I'm not necessarily saying it's religion or any single one. I think that starts to become a way to really think about how we approach leadership, how we ask these questions about power, how we ask these questions about belief in really, really interesting ways. And I think if I read Villeneuve right, that's like dead in his sights, right? He said we could go this way, we could go that way, but right down the middle, there's a chance, and seems to be threading right through them.
And I think you're right that everything, even things that are ambiguous, you can trace back to forms of power. Because if we think about, I mean, obviously, like, this is not necessarily just me trying to get an excuse to say desert power again. But to me, one of the best moments in this whole movie is, and maybe this is our backdoor to talk about Fade Ratha, but like in the final duel, right before they start, when Paul says, and this is what I texted to you right after I saw the movie, may thy knife chip and shatter, right?
Mhm.
And then Fade, and this is probably the best acting moment for me for Austin Butler in this entire movie. When he responds, where he's like, "Yeah, like may thy," like he's saying it back, but he's kind of like has no idea what it means, and like
Right.
it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so to me in that moment, I was like, "Oh, that's so brilliant," because that's establishing that, you know, we sort of thought, like in the first movie, we think of desert power as, and I said this on our retrospective episode, as like that the House Atreides, they're the good guys because they want to work with the desert, they want to work with the Fremen, right? They want to, but that scene sort of kind of like cynically shows that no, it's just another form of power that Paul in that moment is able to have one up over and kind of beat Fade Ratha because he has taken the time to, I don't want to say culturally appropriate, but he has learned the Fremen culture, right? And so he is like that's a power that he has that he can wield, and so he's able to make that threat, knowing the cultural context of it because he's learned about the Fremen, and Fade Ratha has not, and inevitably that is always going to make him more powerful on Arrakis, and so like. And so again, the cynical way of looking at it is not doesn't make him good; it makes him more powerful, and it's just one
Mhm.
of many, many ways in the movie that everyone tries to grab power. So yeah, that's the kind of like anti-white savior, I think, reading of that scene potentially. Also,
Gotcha.
just funny because Austin Butler is like really goofy as in that moment, like, but maybe that's our way to segue into kind of fade out. Didn't I guess like anything else for Rhetorical Situation? Because I feel like there's an easy fade out where I just want to talk about the cast and stuff like that.
Let's catch some
Okay.
cast we haven't talked about because there are. I mean, I'm going to steal this from the big picture to give you a transition. Big picture pointed out everybody in this cast is one of those actors where you're like, oh, this movie, even if the movie's bad, this movie is better with that person, right? It's
Yep.
always good to watch Rebecca Ferguson. It's always good to watch Austin Butler. It's always good to Stellan Skarsgård, like Dave Bautista, right? On and on and on to basically everybody. And so I think it is worth celebrating these like fantastic performances. So Jen, I think you hit Austin Butler first. I assume you're in the Austin Butler hive and you have your
So
TV magazine pinup of him
no,
just off
so
camera. So how are you feeling about Austin
yeah,
Butler?
I didn't love Elvis. I thought he was good in it. So I'm kind of mixed on Austin Butler. Like I like him, and I do think that he is going to be a very like if you see the picture of the cast, did we talk about this last time? Side by side, like those are the four. So we got Timothy Chalamet, Florence Pugh, Zendaya, Austin Butler. That core cast are like, I feel like someone posted, I can't remember where I saw this, but like someone posted a picture of them and was like, these are our actors for the next generation. Like that, this is it.
Mhm.
These are our movie stars, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the next generation of movie stars, right? And so I feel like in that context, I really like him as an actor, but I'm gonna say I'm pretty sure his first line in this movie is in the Elvis voice. And
Right.
then he goes into like a Swedish accent later, and so like
He does
like
do a good job of tapping into like a Skarsgård
yes,
rhythm, which
Yeah.
which feels really good. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's because I was looking for it. I did also think I'm like, oh yeah, he's still Elvising over here. That's fine.
but it's only in
Well,
that first scene. I didn't hear it the
Yeah,
rest of the movie.
I want to
the
say
line does
I'm not.
start "Hey mama," right? So it just no.
Yeah,
No, but it's like
I, I will say I don't have Austin Butler Teen Beat photos on the wall. I have Harkonnen World black and white cinematography photos
yes,
on my wall because that was awesome. And like we had seen it. I had clocked it in the trailers. I was like, oh, there's some sort of black and white flashback. I guess that's going to be
Yeah.
cool to show history of it. But it's like, no, they have a black sun on the planet. So when you walk out into the sun, everything looks black and white. Absolutely incredible.
it's so
Like
crazy.
what a stylistic choice. Up to and including the fireworks that look like ink blot explosions because of the way the sun is set up.
They're
Another
goo
instance
fireworks. It's so good.
another instance of just like Greg, as you sort of correctly noted earlier, of just like what can we do? Like, there's been so many sci-fi things. There's been so many iterations of fantastical worlds. What's new? What's different? and finding something to bring to the table.
And just like you said it, like they don't look black and white until they're out in the sun, and even when like a little light will pass over them, like it's flawlessly executed and just so fantastic. It wasn't until the second time I saw the movie that I was like, oh, Taika Waititi thought he was doing this in the fourth Thor movie, right? Do you remember they went
Oh,
to
with the Christian Bale parts?
yeah,
Mhm.
would no, they go to a planet that's has the color drained out of it for some reason, and they lose their color
Right.
as the scene goes on. Maybe Christian Bale's in that. I'm not sure. But like I was like, oh, Taika, like, oh, buddy, like so sorry that you got totally schooled on this kind of cool similar effect, because it is jaw dropping and exactly the same reaction as PT, because I was sure that was a flashback scene in the original. So and I'll switch over. Like Austin Butler is chewing the scenery in a really wonderful way. When you just said that about those four actors, Best Picture, which I did listen to their reaction, I just couldn't wait till we recorded. They said this is the graduation, and essentially meant that same thing. Like these four have now graduated from being Spider-Man's girlfriend to being this is the movie star. And of those four you list, I think Butler had the shortest trip to graduation, right? He like skipped
Mhm.
Very
10th
true.
grade or something, because he's only had these small number. We haven't seen boys on the bikes on the boys,
Bike riders.
Bike riders.
two boys, two biking, bike riders yet. So we haven't seen that performance. Maybe we'll get to. It shocked me to hear that he it's all makeup, right? Like he did not shave his head because he was doing that movie and couldn't grow it back in time. So I'm shocked that he got into that kind of class, because there are other dudes around that age, but I completely agree that the four of them are just like they're movie stars. I mean,
It was
I was
him or
tempted to tease Wonka, but like if you go from Wonka and open that movie that way to this, and this is gonna have a huge, like, you're a top tier star. Sorry, Chalamet haters.
I also legitimately thought Timothée Chalamet was incredible in this movie. Like
Yeah.
like I did thought he was very good in the first one, but I feel like he kind of, and maybe it's a function of where his character's at in the first movie, but like he's very much like a vessel for everything around him, kind of, you know what I mean? Whereas in this movie, I feel like he really has a couple key scenes where he's coming. One you quoted at the beginning, where he's just when he goes full crazy yelling, like it's just really, because you haven't seen it the whole time, is just really good.
In the first movie, you could read it in as like a Keanu Reeves' Neo of like, oh, like they've cast you because you can be the sort of meek, like you're just sort of a sad boy from like Lady Bird, and that's who Paul's going to be in this movie. And it's like, can he make this pivot? And he absolutely does. Yeah, and I think, I think that he kills it. I agree with Greg that Austin Butler seems to have the shortest walk, although he feels like he also has the most minimal like lead up to it, in terms of like he was just sort of like a guy in things,
right, and
like,
then all of a sudden,
for a while, and then it's like, I feel like he's one of the Manson family people in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Suddenly, then he's Elvis. It's like he's cast as Elvis, and then he has the Bike Riders, which was supposed to come out last year. As
when
was
is that
this
coming
movie.
out? We know.
April or May. It's
Okay, so
it's
this year.
sometime
That's
in
what
the
I
next,
last year.
sometimes this
Yeah.
year. And he's also in I keep thinking of it as
Masters
like
of the Air?
the third Band of Brothers, but yeah, it's like he was one of the like up and comers when they cast it, and now he's like the superstar of Masters of the Air, like him and Barry Keoghan, and then the third guy, Callum Jones, I think, who is the least. I feel like is coming out the best
Boy in the
on that
Boat?
show, but is what was the least famous of the three of them by the time it actually aired, because that's been, I think that filmed like 3 or 4 years ago. That got pandemic jostled as well.
And I don't want to just make fun of Austin Butler's accent. I do want to defend him in this movie. Like he's doing the kind of sadistic psychopath thing really well. Like in the scenes where he's sort of like getting weirdly aroused by violence and stuff like that. I feel like he's actually doing very well. And really matching what I believe it's Leo de Seydoux' character, Lady Fenring, right? She kind of gives the rundown of his character to the Reverend Mother. He's insecure. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but like she lists a bunch of things that are not very nice about him. Like he's insecure, right? And that he's cruel. Like she lists a bunch of like descriptors of him. And I feel like as she was saying that, I'm like, yep. Like I'm convinced of all these things because it's just there's a really good matchup there in terms of the characterization.
And, I don't think it's I don't think it's like a huge flaw in the movie that it has to do so much. It's funny how the last again, like half, maybe even third of this movie feels like, oof, we got to cover a lot of ground after 5 hours of buildup. But there isn't as much focus on Phaedroth as maybe there could be. So he has to get across a lot of these character things in a short amount of time. And he does do, I think he does a really good job of that. Fun, just a fun fact to share about the other person you just mentioned, Jen. But I did watch, unlike Greg watched the David Lynch movie, I watched the documentary that I talked about last time, but had not seen, about the Alejandro Jodorowsky version from the 70s that didn't make it, and that didn't get made. It didn't actually come to fruition. But the documentary is about how sort of he was approached by a producer after his first couple of movies, and they were like, wouldn't you want to work on this? And he was like, yes, I have not read that book, but I do want to do that. And the producer who approached him was a French producer named Michel Seydoux, who is Léa Seydoux' grand uncle. So there's a Seydoux family connection to the Dune franchise.
Amazing. She was great. She didn't have, she wasn't in very much in the movie, but she was great.
I feel like,
and again, really.
I was just gonna say, add her to the list of actors you don't get unless they have a lot to do next movie, right? She, Anya Taylor-Joy, like that, they're gonna be fun to watch play around in this world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think her scenes are so important to this movie for what we were talking about earlier with the sort of like Bene Gesserit. Like everyone's playing checkers, the Bene Gesserit have been playing chess, and they are sort of planning ahead and using, again, to go back to my earlier point about everything is just a form of power, right? Having children to the Bene Gesserit, apparently, like between Lady Jessica being a Harkonnen and presumably a very similar, and I think it's so important that the scene with Phaedroth and Lady Fenring is in there because it sets up the reveal, right? Because I'm imagining that Lady Jessica was born out of a very similar sort of like a Bene Gesserit went to Baron Harkonnen and did the same thing that Lady Fenring does to secure the bloodline, right?
I feel like you're about to give us the talk and you're using euphemisms.
It's like, when Bene Gesserit needs more power.
When a Bene Gesserit really loves an emperor and they've taken all precautions.
But it's like, it seems like it's done very like without anybody's knowledge, right? Like, or at least that's what they imply.
Yeah,
with Phaedroth,
it's shadow power behind the scenes. It's interesting that the TV show that's being developed is a Bene Gesserit, not necessarily history, but a focused on the Bene Gesserit in the past before these movies, which sounds really exciting. Although I also remember being excited about the Continental, the John Wick TV show prequel that I have not spent a second on because the trailer looked bad and everyone who did watch it was like, it's not worth it. So I'm not going to get too excited that this is
right. It doesn't mean it's going to be the same quality.
Like they got to really nail it, but it would be cool if they did. Cause I think that you're right that in the discussion of power, there's the sort of obvious displays of it. And there's the real sort of those conflicts. And then there's the behind the scenes thing. And maybe there's something to unravel there about the gender politics of like the men go out and they fight, and then the women are crafty, manipulative, power behind the thrones, and they're the real evil ones, really, when you think about it.
Does this mean we should talk about the fact that this movie had a character who's a fetus? That had close-ups.
Look, The fact that there was a fetus that talked and a main plot line is, well, if women want to get pregnant, they can just choose to, was very interesting. Coming out within like 10 days of in vitro fertilization being made illegal in parts of the country. So yeah,
Oh
it was.
no, are people
it
gonna
was-
think my opening line is like a
No,
abortion
no.
political statement? Oh,
I don't
no.
think so.
No.
No.
It's clear if they
It only just occurred to me.
Well, I just want to add to that, and maybe this gets cut out. Jen, one of the trailers you missed by not being in my theater, and I can't speak for PT, is there is the one of those kind of inspirational Christian movies, you know, that are like nobody talks about them, but they make a killing around the country. There's one coming out that is some dude, and he loses the love of his life. This is in the trailer. She dies, and then he goes, "But wait, she was IVF." And that means there's another version of her out there. If I can find her, then we can be together again. And my theater lost their minds. They were like, this is insanity. And it's like, that would have been insane anytime. Like, but then the fact that it came out this week after these news stories, it was like, are you kidding me? Like, scrap it. Like, throw it in the trash. Nobody
Right.
knows that it happened.
That movie literally has no audience now. There's no audience for that movie.
No, it's zero. It is a bold choice. I did know from watching the 1984 Dune some of what PT brought up before, and I think you couldn't do what they did. I think it would have been too weird for modern audiences, and I think this kind of nicely threads the needle. While I think purely accidentally bringing up, you know, fetus personhood discourse that is very important and part of political life right now. But I thought the way that Rebecca Ferguson played walking around talking to the fetus was pitch
So
perfect,
good.
no notes. So
Yeah.
Where there's the one point where she just looks down and is like, "Stop it!" Like
Yeah.
like she's arguing with the sister, or like enough. Like,
and also when she's doing it in sort of like the sort of underground caves and like looks up and there's like some people just watching her being like, what the hell? Like, what are you doing? Yeah, it was great. I mean, yeah, I agree, because I felt like you could spend a lot of the movie being like, she's just crazy. Like, she's not talking to anyone. Like, she's just kind of losing the thread a little bit. Then you do hear the voice at the end to be
right.
like, oh, okay,
Not
there is something there.
Not to keep bringing it back to Spider-Man, but there was a little bit of a Venom vibes I was getting from it, right? Where it's like, where it almost feels like Lady Jessica is being sort of like possessed by, like, maybe the fetus is so powerful and is using the voice on her, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it feels, doesn't that happen in the movie? Right? Like, I'm not making that up. Okay. So yeah, it does kind of feel like who's in control, again, power and control, right? Like, who's in control? Is it Lady Jessica? Is it the unborn sister? To me, if we're thinking about it aesthetically, like if we think about, and I talked about this on a retrospective episode, that Villeneuve has like a very distinctive aesthetic when approaching this adaptation, and to me, it almost seemed like he was like, "Oh, a fetus looks really creepy and weird," and like, you know what I mean, like, and alien, like, you know what I mean, and like was kind of thought close-ups of it, not even just to establish it as like a being and a character, but like just to contribute to sort of the overall visual language of the film, like to be like, and like the Harkonnens are bald and the fetus is bald, you know what I mean? Like, to me, it kind of visually made sense and seemed like a more, like, in some ways seemed more of an aesthetic choice in terms of making this more sci-fi-y than, you know what I mean?
He watched 2001 and saw The Star Child and was like, wait a minute, what if?
But yeah, I would say that is probably, in terms of filmmaking, like that is the boldest choice. And I'm curious to, like, you know, to hop back to Rhetorical Situation, is like, is there going to be weird discourse around that?
Yes.
Okay.
But
just brace ourselves.
I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be like the primary discourse around it. But I do think there will be some discourse. The other discourse I'm predicting would be for Dune Part 3, when the people who don't get the this isn't good, like, he's not the Messiah, he's just a very naughty boy. There was a Life of Brian thread running underneath from especially the like only the true Messiah denies his divinity. Like, what chance does that give me? Kind of like element to it. But yeah, I think there's gonna be people who go see the third movie and Paul is clearly not the hero by the end, and they're gonna be like, wait, what? It's gonna be a little Last Jedi Luke Skywalker, where they're like, they ruined Paul. Like, why did they make Paul such a jerk? Like, he's just a nice guy who wants to save Arrakis. Like, what's going on? So I think that, yeah, we can brace for like those bad takes, and we can brace for I would assume, you know, maybe well-meaning takes, but like in both directions, the people that are like, I think it's unfortunate or actively bad that there is in this time of personhood debates, there's a fetus character in this movie, as well as people who are like, yes, I love Dune Part 2 for proving my stance is correct, that fetal heartbeat is the way to go here in this world where there's spaceships and people floating and weird hovermen and all this stuff, where it's just like, yeah, maybe not everything in this movie is realistic, but they might lock in on that as being like, oh, that's a statement. I feel like Denis may be like, oh, I wish I may have made a different choice. I wish I wasn't wading in these waters right now at this time, but oh well.
Sensing that we might go towards awards watch soon, I don't want to leave this movie conversation without hearing from each of you. So we'll set aside the Black Sun planet, the Harkonnen planet. Can I just hear your other favorite shot or couple shots if you have a couple nominees? Like, there's so much stunning visually. I'd just love to hear kind of where were you just like... Well, I also kept stealing PT. When we see a movie, he sends us Al Pacino from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, going, "What a picture!" So, what moments in the theater had you go like, "Ah, what a picture"?
I'm going to go with two, but I don't want to share both because I'm afraid I might steal. They're small, but I might steal from Jen. The one that immediately leaps to mind is actually, it's very late. It's when the Emperor's arriving on Arrakis, and he arrives in this like chrome orb that is floating over the world. And I was just like, oh, you can see the desert and the transition into the city of Arrakeen in the reflection of the chrome on the orb, while it is also on the bottom of the screen. And I was like, God damn cinema. This is like, they did everything. They really thought that through, and they figured out what the reflections would look like. Like, this is amazing. And it's a very, very small and very little, but like, I was like, it just, that's a little thing, but it really grounds. It's like, yeah, that's what would have to happen. You would have to reflect what was coming up from the ground.
The ones I immediately think of are anytime we have, I think they're usually Harkonnen soldiers floating down.
Yeah, and just like that was my two.
The movement of that is just so smooth and ethereal and like weird. And I'm just like, how did they even do this? And like, because it doesn't look like actors strapped into harnesses like being lowered.
No.
Like the gravity of it seems different. And so I think that was probably the first time that happened. My moment was just like, oh, this movie, like, oh my goodness. I also really liked the Fremen city, like especially the sacred waters. I think that from a production design standpoint, that looks super cool. And really like gave gravity to that moment where he's explaining these are like, we might be dying of thirst, we will never drink this water. Like I just, that anything like Fremen culture related, I think was really well done because the production design really supported it. And just like all the shots of this is where Lady Jessica throws up, and Stilgar's like, don't let it out. Don't let it out.
Don't let it out.
Don't waste that water.
Javier Bardem cracked me up through this entire movie. Like, it was
flawless.
And it really and was like an element that the movie really needed, I think, like to kind of lighten it up a little bit in parts and give him a reprieve. But like, but just the design of and the shots of them basically plugging the water taps into the dead people or dying people in some, it's like there's a soldier that's not even dead yet that they're doing it to. I thought it was really good.
Like patting the hand away. He's like, no. And then they just like vacuum seal him. Like the bodies just like suck up. That's incredible. I will note Another, which was, I feel a little bad saying it because this was the scene that we got after the Dune Part 1 re-release, was Paul getting on the sandworm for the first time. But there's multiple parts of the shot, and it's echoed at the end where it's like, him standing on like in the foreground on the sort of, a peak of a dune, so to speak, and you see the worm kind of approaching in the distance. But then once he's actually on it, and we're sort of with in the foreground are the Fremen celebrating, and it's just like the sense of distance of just like, he really is super small, and this worm where they're like, this is the biggest worm we've ever seen. It's like, it's a grandfather worm.
Grandpappy
Doesn't even look that big because it's so far away. Like, it just does such a good job of being like, oh right, this is what it would look like. It wouldn't look like, oh, it's coming right next door. Like, they would make sure they were that far away. It was just, it just reinforced sort of, oh right, how big this all is, how and how smart they are, how much they know sort of their world. And I want to set up the transition to the next part by correcting one thing, Jen. You didn't give him his full title. I believe you mean future Best Supporting Actor nominee Javier Bardem is excellent in this movie.
Wait, can I say one more? Give a shout out to one more shot though.
Okay.
Sorry. Now I'm see how it feels. See how it feels when you have a perfect transition and someone steps all over it.
Yeah.
The overhead shot, and then I want to hear Greg's. The overhead shot of when they first arrive at the South, and Paul is walking through the crowd.
Oh yes.
Whoa, so good. It's beautiful. But it's just like little heads.
Yeah.
And they all are the same color scheme.
Right.
And
so their robes and their hoods are sort of all
so good. Yeah, I feel like the more I sit and think about it, the more I can think of, because there's so many great, beautiful visuals.
Greg, what was
yours, Greg?
I mean, many that you just mentioned in the worm, riding the worm scene. I just wanted to shout out when it hits the dune a little over from him, and the dune starts to collapse, and he runs along the edge and jumps. Like, of course, that's how that would work. But you think about those as like mountains, and so like the way it's just kind of disintegrating totally worked for me.
Yeah, it's very fluid.
There's some really good action set pieces in this film, which we have not talked that much about, but there's an early raid on a Harkonnen harvester, I guess, and Johnny and Paul take down an ornithopter. And so there's just this last shot in that sequence where they are sprinting across. You see them underneath the harvester's feet, so it's scale, and the ornithopter crashes behind them in just this huge explosion, and a fantastic, haven't talked about him nearly enough, Hans Zimmer, like, and you're just like, yes,
so good.
Like, I'll see this movie every day until I die. This is why I come to the movies. So that to me was kind of one to shout out the action filmmaking. The scene where the two leads are making out at the top of a dune, but you just see the whole expanse of the desert behind them. I believe this is their first kiss. That's, I mean, it's Lawrence of Arabia, but it's like, yeah, you can't do that in the volume. Sorry, beloved Star Wars properties. Like, I just, to really celebrate, they went there, and it's hard. Like, I mean, I think about how half an hour on the beach and I'm all grumpy, and these people lived it in a scale unimaginable, and it was beautiful, and it like all the natural landscapes really worked.
When sand is coarse and rough and gets everywhere.
I hate sand.
Someone had to say it. I really love to kind of riff off that. When Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet are sand walking together in tandem, beautiful, so beautiful.
Yes.
I was like,
you were thinking of future Joker movie Pas de Deux, because that's not what they went with. Is that Folie à Deux?
I don't speak French, so I don't know. But something like that.
Pas de Deux is a ballet, and I'm mispronouncing that. All our French listeners are going to write in and tear me to shreds. But it's balletic, and that is a romantic ballet, right? Like, it's a duet usually between a man and a woman to have kind of love. And sorry, I'm walking all over yours. But then the tracks, like the tracks are stunningly beautiful, that
Yes.
and like to me that's like, how do they make movies where they had these actors do that, and then for the second take they had to rake all the sand and so on. So it's just like incredible,
because it's almost like it's like calligraphy, like
yeah,
with
it
their
really
feet.
is.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
I want to know two other little like quick beats about the two of them from scenes that Craig was just mentioning, and you as well, Jen, when they were when they end up walking together sort of in synchronously. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Synchronously.
Synchronously. Thank you.
Yeah.
Synchronously, not a real word. Anyway, the sort of lead up is she's like, well, you got to do this, and he's like, well, according to the books I read from the anthropologist, and then she's just like looks at him like, excuse you, and so that was shots fired at academics, but very fair, and especially from the a little kind of the colonialism, academic colonialism. Of just sort of like, here's what these people and what their lives are like, and he's realizing, okay, it's not the same as the lived experience, and that scene that ends with that helicopter. There's another time later where there's a similar sort of explosion happens in the background, like on a like slightly delayed, or it's like you think, oh, there's gonna be an explosion, but you don't see it. Like it takes a couple extra seconds for it to happen, and it works great both times. But the build up to the explosion is they're sort of like, okay, like she has the like rocket launcher, and it's like, I'm gonna shoot. He's like, well, I'll distract them. We have to get their shields down, and they're like, they do a really good job without like showing that this is gonna happen. It was just a nice beat of action filmmaking of like he runs the ornithopter starts firing, and then like he like survives, of course, and then the guy starts firing and the shield comes back up, and you're like, oh, I guess she never shot the thing. And then the guy firing from the ornithopter like turns, and the bolt from the rocket launcher is like stuck in the shield, like slowly making its way through. And it's like, oh right, he didn't realize that because he was focused on Paul, he didn't hear that or see that, so neither did we in the audience. Like we didn't see her shoot it, we didn't hear that explosion or that the discharge, and then by the time he realizes it, it's too late for him, and then we get to celebrate that ornithopter blowing up. What a nice little beat.
That just reminded me that we haven't talked about the final fight really that much. Like we've referenced it a couple of times, but to me, the callback to the first movie and his opening training scene with Gurney, where he's like, the whole knife thing, and then like, I'm taking you down with me, like you got me, but you're gonna go down with me. And the fact that was so visually clear to me that I immediately thought of that scene. Yes. And was like, oh, he's taking it. We've come full circle. He's taking what he learned from that opening scene in the first movie to defeat Fade Ratha. I was just like, this is genius. This whole thing is genius.
And once again, shouting out the woman who had enjoyable vocal reactions. Clearly did think that Paul had been stabbed when the sound of it, because she had a very big reaction. And it was like, oh, when she realized that it was Fade Ratha. Even though it was like, did you really think that like they were gonna just kill the main character? Like even if this were the end of the movie, like what a weird thing.
They did a good job with the reaction shots of establishing that everyone in that room thought he was dead.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, or going to die. So yeah, it's great. Look what you did, Greg. We can't stop now. We can't stop shouting out scenes that we love from this movie. But yeah, we should move into Oscars watch. So who wants to do the reminder? Like maybe someone didn't listen to our retrospective episode. Someone want to do the facts rundown? Maybe PT can do that.
I mean, I love talking facts, and I love talking history. So reminder that Dune Part 1 was the most Oscar awarded movie of its year in 2021. I think it might have been the most nominated as well. But it won 6 Academy Awards. It won Best Score, Best Sound, Best Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Production Design, and Best Visual Effects. Why did I say best each time? I don't know, but once it got started, I couldn't stop. It was also nominated for Picture, Adapted Screenplay, Costume Design, and Makeup and Hairstyling. Famously, not for director. That was the weird sort of snub of the year that Denis didn't make it. I want to shout out deep into this episode, the episode of The Big Picture, not about Dune Part 2, but there was a segment. I think it's the one that was also like the SAG Awards reaction that had the person who used to work for the Academy talking about the voting processes and the nomination processes, the sort of the ranked choice voting for Best Picture, but then also how the different categories, how nominations happen, what the sort of steps are for that. Super insightful. I think I was the last of the three of us to listen to it. So you two had already talked about it a little bit on the text thread by the time I actually finished the episode. But that was really useful to sort of show that, like, the directors nominate the directors, the directing branch nominates them. And I don't think that is meant as a slight. They meant it as a slight, but it's just possible everyone was like, yeah, he'll be nominated, so we'll put these other names down, and he ended up on the outside looking in. But yeah, this has a legacy of this 2-movie franchise has a legacy from the first movie of being very Oscars friendly.
So I'll start off by saying we established in our Maestro episode that this is a rough year for movies. And so we don't know what indie darlings we don't know about yet, but it seems like it's going to be a pretty quiet year. And that's going to work huge advantage for Dune. I assume you both agree that we don't even need to worry about talking about the technical categories. This will be nominated basically in everything. So I think for me, to pick up on what PT just put down, if Denis Villeneuve is not nominated, what are we even doing? Because it was a snub last time, and this is an incredible achievement. And so I'm the one who put in the doc then, kind of all that bracketed. Are there any performances that really do make it in? Because I think that's probably the difference between a huge night and a really good night.
That's sort of what I was going to say. Is now, having seen the movie, I am more convinced that it has more than Dune Part 1. It has more potential to break through in the acting categories. And I think Timothée Chalamet in particular, he really is stepping up and carrying this movie. It's not to say that doesn't imply that other people are not carrying their weight, but I feel like he really just, like, it's clearly his movie, and he's just, his presence in the whole thing is amazing. And so I would say more than the first one, he now has a chance in Best Actor. After him, Zendaya is possible. I would have less hope for her, probably. Javier Bardem, just because the Academy loves Javier Bardem with good reason. He's amazing,
and he's great.
But yeah, what are other ones that you feel like could potentially make it in?
My thinking for 2 people that are in this movie is that they may not get nominated for this movie, but if they're good in the other movie that was supposed to come out in 2023 that's now coming out in 2024, it could give them a boost there, which is Austin Butler in the aforementioned Bike Riders and Zendaya in Challengers, which, I don't know if either of those movies, they've got some pedigree because they're from directors that have gotten some acting nomination action in the past. I don't know how good those movies will be, and I don't know. I'm sure they will turn in solid performances. I don't know if they're going to necessarily be Academy nomination worthy, but sometimes there's people where it's just like, oh yeah, but they also were in this movie. Like, would Zendaya get nominated for Challengers with a kind of for Best Actress with and she also was in Dune and was great in that. And then same with Austin Butler. I mean, I'll also throw out, I don't think this would, I think, not because of the gender breakdown of it, but I think the 2 men you mentioned, Chalamet and Bardem, would be more likely to get looks first. I think Rebecca Ferguson in supporting actress should get some mention because, like, she is sort of unhinged in a way that is, like, really interesting, and I think has some, like, little showy moments that might really sort of connect with the
and her physical acting when she first takes the water of life is so good, where she's just like A+ writhing, like, it's like
Are there any technical? I'm looking to see now. I guess there really weren't. I was like, were there any technical awards it didn't get nominated for the first
time around?
And I don't believe, I think it got everything it
Yeah, I think it got all of them.
have. Is there anything that so just to reiterate, it didn't win costume design or makeup and hairstyling. It did win the 6 other technical awards. Do you think it's possible? I mean, again, we don't know what else is out there, but like, I would assume it's the front runner for the 6 that it won last time. Right
what
now,
what did it lose to? I guess the question for me is: it the Barbie of next year, or is it the Oppenheimer of next year?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think as of right now, and again, we don't know. As Greg said, there might be these smaller movies, these movies that like I could see some studios or filmmakers like who might be in post-production come summer being like, yo, let's finish this movie fast and get it out because there's an opening. We might actually have a better chance for some awards things. I think that right now the main contender would seem to be Furiosa, because that's another movie following up from I believe 5 or 6 time Academy Award winning movie in Fury Road, with with a bunch more nominations there. The looking initially, it's like unclear if that is going to be as fully realized a vision as Fury Road, which is mostly to say that like that CGI looked a little weird in the trailer, but that movie, again, could be incredible. Another Anya Taylor-Joy joint that she's just running. So, Jen, let me ask you. I don't mean to do this as like a trivia question. What's the deal that you always say? I do. I love it. What's the thing you always want people to remember with best makeup when it comes to?
It is often tied with best an acting category. So
correct. So Gary, it was the Eyes of Tammy Faye. No, it was the Eyes of Tammy Faye.
Oh yeah.
With Jessica Chastain.
Yeah.
And then best costume design for a movie that is centered around costume design, Cruella won.
That's year. Right. And that
which okay.
And that if I remember correctly, the punditry from that year was that the designer from Cruella was so well loved that it was more of like a career. Like it was like she had an edge regardless of how people felt about the movie or even the designs in it because of the designer. So
it was her third Academy Award, and she had previously won for Mad Max Fury Road, as well as A Room with a View, a very similar movie to Mad Max Fury Road. Basically the same thing.
So Greg had put this very, very astutely put this both in Rhetorical Situation and in Oscar Was Watch. We still haven't totally talked about it yet, but how does the part 2, part 3, half a movie, whole movie, trilogy, what is happening? How is all of that discourse going to impact the Oscars? Do you think that once people see the movie and it's very clear that the plot is sort of setting up another movie, is that going to prolong the Oscar success or best picture chances, or how does that play in?
I will say I see it. I mean, it's all anybody's going to talk about. See Spider-Verse this year. See, every time Return of the King gets invoked, right? They're going to Return of the King it, as if that's a verb. And so I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb and say, I think that this feels complete enough. It is not so much of a cliffhanger that you feel totally unfulfilled. That is running counter to what I said some people in my theater were acting like. But I just feel like when you look at this, it feels like a complete story. It's not half a story. We got a full story. We just have another piece of it yet to learn. So I'm going to say I don't think it'll have that big a discourse. Helped somewhat with it's going to be a really quiet year.
I think that's right. Unless the only sort of hurdle I see, one would be if this movie is super successful and Warner Brothers is like, we are going to announce there's a third movie as soon as possible, then that could maybe reposition the discussion to this is part 2. This is only the middle. That Return of the King discourse kicks in, which sometimes kind of feels like copium, like with Avatar: Way of Water, where it's just sort of like, oh, but they're waiting for the third one, and it's like, are they, or are they look, you're gonna get Avatar's
hard to compare to because there's going to be like a million of those. You know what I mean? Like,
Theoretically.
it's not a trilogy. It's like they're going to keep making 5 or 6 or 7.
I mean, with the
they stop.
asterisk of like James Cameron's not getting younger, so like he's
That's true.
saying he's going to make them, but like, you know, yeah, it was he's written 5 movies, but then the last, you know, and maybe this was because of that Return of the King discourse. The last, like Around Way of Water, he's like, I'm definitely doing a 3rd one, and then there's the drafts of scripts for 4 and 5. Those may go off to someone else. I may, like George Lucas, hand that off to, you know, sell the company, sell the franchise or whatever. But I think that like the other thing that would push back against it, even if there are people who are like, yeah, this is a concluding story, or it's, you know, it functions so well on its own, I don't really care that it's in the middle of something, is the sort of push and pull that can happen with Best Picture winners, where like, I mean, especially when it's like there's a crash and everyone's like, well, that was a mess, and then, you know, I mean, you get the Martin Scorsese coronation the next year with The Departed, and then No Country for Old Men versus There Will Be Blood, where people are like, okay, and then, you know, there was the Moonlight Spotlight, and then weird sort of Shape of Water, and then it was like, what if we just went with Green Book? Like, what if we did like the very sort of simple movie that like is really a crowd pleaser? And then the response to that was, okay, no, people were kind of upset about Green Book, like maybe we'll vote for Parasite. And again, I'm ascribing sort of this like decision making to this huge monolith of tens of thousands of voters who are not necessarily thinking that way, but there is, you can see a narrative of ebb and flow, and it looks, by all accounts, like this year is going to be a really big blockbuster is going to win. Like Oppenheimer, a movie that was like, you know, had a bunch of you know, credibility and pedigree as you know, a big biopic and a blockbuster filmmaker, but was still like even exceeded what was expected in terms of success. And at least, I mean, I'm hoping Dune Part 2 does a similar thing. Is there going to be like, we just did this, like we just did the blockbuster for Best Picture, like maybe we need to find a really small movie that we elevate instead of giving it to, you know, a big Hollywood success story. And then once, if that door starts opening for some people, then the whispers of, and also it's only Part 2, like there's really going to be a Part 3, like I think could start to snowball into, you get a bunch of nominations and you win a bunch of things below the line, but it still doesn't,
Right. It doesn't
you know,
push through.
get over the hump for picture. I also could see a Villeneuve director and some small movie wins picture split. Could be something that happens.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So the other thing too, I'll add, and this goes back to what Greg brought up earlier. If the word on the street is Villeneuve is taking a break before doing Part 3, then people might be like, well, we better give it to it now, because we don't know. Like if it's like a long time out, you know what I mean? Like that's the only counter argument I have to what you're saying of like, the like, let's wait for Part 3. But
Ugh.
yeah, I don't know. We'll have
You're
to
making
see.
me afraid of them waiting, and then there's something between Villeneuve and Warner Brothers where it falls apart and he leaves the project, and then we
No.
never get to. Like that's
You
the
take that back.
darkest timeline. So
Dune Part 3 coming from Brett Ratner in 2027.
Ron Howard has been brought in to finish.
Aw.
Sorry,
He's holding
Ron
up
Howard,
a Dune
I'll
Part
do
3
this.
sign, smiling.
All right. I think, yeah,
Well-
either way, it will be exciting, and I think it'll be fun to root for. I remember rooting, like cheering very hard and really hope-dicting a lot for Dune when Dune Part 1 was
And being super
nominated.
excited when the tweets came in from the pre-televised ceremony.
Yeah, that was a
and
raw
it
deal.
won four of the awards.
I don't think they're ever going to do that again. So hopefully,
No, thank God. I think the last question I think it's the last question. I think the last question we should talk about is to help us begin this transition, because I am so excited about Dune Part 2. I kind of want to just talk about the 2025 Oscars instead of the Oscars happening in 8 days from as of this recording. But what do the two of you think would have happened if this came out when it was supposed to? If this was a fall 2023 movie, what would have happened in terms of its Oscar nominations, and who do you think would have been pushed out if it was getting nominations?
I mean, I think you said it earlier. Oppenheimer would just be too big, and there wouldn't be enough room for another technical achievement.
You don't think it would even be nominated in technical achievements?
I don't know. Greg, what do you think?
What's so hard is Oppenheimer had its initial thing, and then when it was a quietish fall, it was like, well, let's put Oppenheimer back out, and let's talk about Oppenheimer again, and let's see it again. And so if you had cut that off on October 20th or whenever it was, and then it was, we have Dune, and Dune is awesome, and we can watch Dune, and we don't have to worry about Oppenheimer. It's really hard to figure out, in my mind, which one of those would have dominated the like November, December, which is so key for this, for award season. I will say I enjoyed all those picks you just made for acting nominations. Those categories are so tight this year that I think if it had come out last year, it would have gone just to the technical. I think you would have heard more of the, well, it's only part 2 and it's a crowded year, so let's wait and reward them all. I mean, who do you kick out? Like, really, I mean, pick somebody in each category and put a Dune person in there. That's tough in a lot of these categories outside of the technical achievements. So, yeah, it's really
tricky. I feel
like
visual effects, it would definitely get in because that category is weird this year. And then there's definitely room for it to get in there. And then, like,
I think any Napoleon nomination would have been replaced. That's because I think whatever juice Napoleon got, that got it to, I believe, 3 nominations, would have gone to Dune.
Yeah, sound probably would be my next most likely for this year.
Yeah,
it could have gotten
in. Which
and score,
I guess
it's probably booting out American Fiction.
Yeah, right? or maybe, sorry, Greg, maybe Indiana Jones. It depending upon how much of the let's give it another nomination to John Williams was like the sort of like bonus 5th spot, or was American Fiction the bonus 5th spot. But yeah, I mean, once you get beyond that, and then there, makeup and hairstyling has like, they're somewhat outlier, both Golda and Society of the Snow. I feel like those might have happened anyway, but then like, would Poor Things maybe, or even Oppenheimer have maybe not gotten? Is that where maybe the Oppenheimer might have gotten kicked out because of Dune? Yeah, it's tough. And then looking up to director, there would have been a Villeneuve got screwed last time. Who would they have kicked out? I feel like it probably would have been Justine Triet, and that would have sucked.
Yeah.
So it's now. I'm glad it's coming out now, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the Holy War has begun. So we're ready to get out of here. Greg, where can folks find you on the internet?
Any social media you like, I am at IonCanon, EYEONCANON. If you don't find me there under that name, then get off that platform. It's not worth being there.
And PT, where can folks find the show?
Once again, they can follow us on Instagram or Threads at The Long Take Review. They can follow us on Letterboxd at LTR Pod, and they can subscribe, rate, and review anywhere where they get their podcasts.
And you can find me on Instagram and Threads at Subchokchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. This was so much fun, everybody. Thank you.
Yay!
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive new podcast episodes as well as written reviews of films with Oscar buzz and new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.